Welcome back to the channel. The Chosen, Season 3, Episode 2 aired just last night. And I thought, it came out only a week after the last one, so may as well give it a shot. I am in a little bit different of a location this morning as I record, so there's a little glare coming in through the window, but it is what it is. What I'd like to do, I think, with this look at Season 3, Episode 2 is to kind of give a rundown of the episode. It was over an hour long, and there was a lot of back and forth going on. A lot of different characters were involved. And then to start with a few positives, and then just general observations of the episode, both with maybe with a few more positives, and then some things that perhaps could use some improvement. So the episode kind of begins with this, what they call in the episode, a shanty town kind of being put up because these entire families were following Jesus, looking for the next place that he would be preaching. We get this interaction kind of left on a cliffhanger last time with Matthew and the reuniting with his mother and his father. So we get a little bit of that. And the Romans are more heavily involved here. We see Gaius again a little bit later. The relationship issues are still there. I don't know so much issues, but developments. You see Peter back with his wife, Rama and Thomas, and all of these things, which I'll get into a little bit later. The 12 are officially called apostles. Now, depending on the gospel account, will kind of depend on when they officially are called apostles. But I will make a note on this specific sending, and I do appreciate the way this scene was done here. And then you get this interaction with little James the younger, and Jesus concerning James's condition that he supposedly has. And then finally, we had the reuniting of Matthew and his mother and father in the beginning. And then at the end, you have Matthew reuniting with Gaius, and then finally the apostles getting ready to get sent out. So just a few things that I do have to say that I liked. Of course, one of the big negatives that I have seen through this entire series is a complete lack of forgiveness. And we finally get the forgiveness of sins in this one. Of course, Matthew's mother does have to really pull this out of his father, right? Say you forgive him, but he finally does, right? We finally have those words, you're forgiven. It takes a long time to get there, but we do finally get there. The other positive that I saw with this, and I was kind of waiting, I was listening very carefully to the sending out of the 12, sending them out 2 by 2. Now you'll note that in Luke's gospel, the 72 are sent out 2 by 2, but we do have the sending of the 12 in Mark's gospel 2 by 2, and of course they're all nervous and scared, and that's a nice touch, pulling this from Mark's gospel, sending them out 2 by 2, because they were very they didn't really know what was going on in Mark's account of the gospel, and the character playing Jesus very specifically says that he's giving them this authority in this case, and that they'll have this full authority later, which I thought was, to the show's credit, a very nice touch, because they do have that authority in this specific situation, but then later on in the gospel, specifically right after the transfiguration of Jesus, they're unable to cast out demons. Right? Well, how can they have the authority in that situation but not later, right? they didn't have the clear command of Jesus after that, not until the ascension and the outpouring of the Spirit at Pentecost. So very careful attention to detail there that I appreciated from the show. The other thing, and there are these lines, right? And granted, they're very true biblically, but I can see it in the after shows and all this that I don't admittedly watch. But all of this is a lot of it's to sell merchandise, right? Come and see. And then there's the "not what you were" line. Now, granted, even if it is to sell a few t-shirts or coffee mugs or whatever, this is a very important note from the gospel. And this is what it's all about. You are not who you were. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 6, he gives this long list of sins. Some of them are very explicit. And he says, as were some of you, but you were washed, you were sanctified, you were justified. Those are the things that I appreciate most about the show. Just when the gospel comes forward. Now, it's not this. Too many Christians today kind of take this in an antinomian way. That is to say, even though they'll admit, yeah, that's not who I am no longer who I was, but let me tell you who I was, and go on this long testimony or whatever, almost boasting and reveling in who they were, saying, look at what Jesus pulled me out of. No, if that's not who you were, let's not talk about it anymore. Right? You're no longer a tax collector. You're no longer a zealot. We're not going to even call you these things anymore. So that's a strong point there. What else? I'm looking down at a few notes that I jotted down to see any more just explicit positives, but that's pretty much it. Now, as far as a few notes are concerned, I think we have a misconception that entire families, men, women, children, just kind of picked up everything and started following Jesus, when this is not actually the case. Families were not going to do this to go set up tents. They're looking to see when's Jesus' next sermon going to be, as if he's just randomly doing these things. Now, granted, he is teaching as he goes, but what do the scriptures actually have to say? They say that Jesus went from town to town, from village to village, preaching in the synagogues. Where's he going to be preaching? Well, on the Sabbath, in the synagogue. That's where he's going to have the scrolls laid out and interpreting them for the people. So to just kind of be running around wondering where in the world is he, again, from the scriptures, people know where he is. They even, when Jesus will get into a boat, they'll even beat him to the other side. They know where he's going. They know where he is. So it's not like, oh, where's Jesus? We don't know. Even when he tries to withdraw into the mountainside, they still know. The people are still there. Again, the scriptures tell us, especially around the feeding of the 5,000, that, you say Mark 6, that they were going here and there, and they had no leisure even to eat. Everybody knew where they were all the time. All right? So I've already touched on the forgiveness between Matthew and his father. Again, it was another, this would have been the point that I would have turned off the show. Honest. That Matthew here was broken, just like the apostle was with Mary. Broken. Didn't feel like he could go anywhere near home. And there was silence. Nothing happened until the mother. I mean, you could tell that there was reconciliation going on, but the words are what's actually important. right? With that to hear the words, and finally that that gets brought out. Let's see. The one Roman who says he's going to Jerusalem because he has to talk to Pilate. Pilate didn't live in Jerusalem. Again, we see Pilate there because it's the Passover when Jesus is crucified. Pilate would go to Jerusalem during the feasts. His home, the place he resided, was actually at Caesarea, Maritime Caesarea by the sea. That palace, that headquarters, has been archaeologically discovered. So if you're going for a meeting with Pilate, you're going to Caesarea. You're not going to Jerusalem, unless, of course, it's a feast. And there was no clue in the episode that there was a feast going on. Like I said in the last review, perhaps you could say that's nitpicky. It is, but for as much as the creators of the show want to say they do their research and talk to experts and everything like this, that's an easy one. Now, as far as some, just the other things that are really getting to me, and I didn't mention it last time, but all of this relationship stuff, like why do we need to turn this into like a romantic deal? It's got to be, we got to make these apostles, we got to make these disciples relatable, right? They have relationship struggles. They want to get married. They want to do this. They want to do that. Just leave it alone. Like we don't need the sexual tension between Peter and his wife while he's got other apostles living in the house. Okay, ha ha ha. It's funny. We get it. But do we need it? Is it necessary? I don't know. The stuff with Rama and Thomas wanting to get married. What about when the apostles say, we've left everything to follow you? Right? I mean, it doesn't look like they've left everything to follow Jesus when Thomas is starting a married life, starting a brand new relationship. And then one of the apostles makes a comment like, well, I'd marry you. I don't necessarily think with where our culture is today with these kind of issues that's a necessary comment to make, even though it was for humor. I don't know that that's necessary. And then the comments like, oh, I've searched my heart and this is right. Man, if there's just, it's like we're living in the 1990s again. This is how relationships were. Oh, I feel it in my heart. Gross. The women, it's actually the women who come out and say, we've left everything to follow. Now, not only was that never asked of them, it was certainly never commanded of them. And that's almost the apostles are the ones who haven't left everything. And the women are the ones saying that they have, which is problematic, especially when Rama wants to go along with Thomas and she says, oh, well, I can proclaim his word everywhere I go and help spread the message. The women are not publicly proclaiming the message here. Even in the resurrection. Yes, they're the first witnesses, but they go privately to the apostles. Watch very carefully how this goes, okay? So Rama wants to go, publicly proclaim as she goes along with Thomas. But the romantic stuff, there's so much in the Bible that we can get into. If we're sending the apostles, and I know they probably want to slow things down a little bit, but have them at the end of the episode start to encounter somebody who is sick. I don't know. Let's see. Where else shall we go? Oh, the James and the Jesus scene bothered me too. That We see Jesus in the Gospels ask people, do you want to be healed? And Jesus explicitly asked James if he wants to be healed. Yes. And Jesus doesn't do it. And he gives this explanation as to why. And, basically that it will come in time. But this shows a completely different image of Jesus than we ever get in the Bible. Now, granted, Jesus doesn't heal everyone who's sick and everyone who's paralyzed, but everyone who he encounters, he does. Every time. No questions asked. People cannot help but be healed in his presence. They don't even have to be in his presence. Think about the Syrophoenician woman and her daughter. Or the centurion, who might wind up being Gaius, and his son. Jesus isn't even there in proximity with these sick people, and they're healed. Creation cannot help but to work properly when Jesus is present. So for him to ask James, which this condition is completely invented by the show, right? Every apostle has something that you can relate to. They want you to relate to them. But it's invented for a show, fine, it's the show. But do not have an apostle crippled saying he wants to be healed and then Jesus telling him, it's not time yet. That bothered me a lot. And yeah, anyway, just because we don't see that anywhere in the scriptures. The Matthew and Gaius commentary at the end was nice. You can tell he really cares about Matthew. And we have examples, like I've mentioned before, about Jesus dealing with the Roman centurions actually believing, truly you are the Son of God. We see this in the book of Acts with Cornelius. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, and how and if there's any pushback from the Romans as a result of some of these guys believing. I could also, at the end of the episode, I could leave that little huggy circle prayer alone. There are just so many characteristics of American Christianity just in the last 20 years, church growthy stuff that just are all over these episodes. And I actually think in one of the very first reviews I did several years ago, I mentioned something about I wonder how many people Jesus is going to go around hugging and all of this. So overall, I don't know that it was that bad. When my wife and I watch other shows and we'll come across one that just kind of was like, well, that was a show. That was an episode. I'll tell her, yeah, that was just to kind of move the plot along. There was really nothing else there than just to move the people from one place to another, right? At the end of episode 1, Jesus said, okay, go take leave, take a rest. We didn't really get anything. I almost expected this to be a complete episode with the character playing Jesus being absent. We've had those before. Because he said, go leave, take your rest. But here he was again, right away. So this, I think this was more of an episode just to kind of move people from one place to another, to get things going. So that was pretty much it. None of these thoughts are earth-shattering, groundbreaking, anything like this. But I don't know. So, some of you in the last one kind of are feeling the same way. I have a sneaking suspicion that there are many, many, many others of you who feel completely opposite, who feel like everything is just right, and that biblical accuracy and cultural accuracy don't necessarily matter so long as Jesus and the apostles are relatable and can bring more people to him. I don't know. That's a debate for another time, perhaps. But again, seemingly harmless episode. It is what it is. I guess episode 3 will come out next Sunday. So we'll just have to see. I'm glad the forgiveness of sins is there, though. Step in the right direction. So we'll see you next time.